Okay, so this lesson's going to be about scale incorporation for jazz improvisation. And this is exactly as it sounds. It's learning how to incorporate new scales into your playing and into your improvising. This is an important topic because, by learning how to incorporate new scales, we effectively enhance the colours that we have to choose from when we're improvising, giving us a broader range of notes to choose from, and a wider colour spectrum to use when we're improvising. It also allows you to create greater levels of tension and some more interesting resolutions. So to begin with, I'll talk about how I go about practicing this, and the way I approach it is quite holistically. So there's 3 basic steps to begin with, and the first being scale practice. So make sure you have the scale under your fingers, you know what the notes are, you can play them through 12 keys, so that you've got the technical ability, but also developing your oral skills to hear the sound of that scale. The second point will be incorporating it into a 2-5-1, which is the basic setting for tension release in most jazz, especially standard jazz compositions. And then thirdly, it will be incorporating this scale or the material into a tune. So let's get started. Okay, so first of all, getting the scale under your fingers, making sure that you're aware of the actual notes in the scale, but then also being able to find some melodic pathways throughout the scale are really important. So within my scale practice, within my practice schedule, I will incorporate the scale that I'm attempting to look at further into my practice and into my improvising practice. So let's take, for instance, the half-whole scale. Half-whole scale is a very important scale in jazz improvisation, widely used in the bebop period, but also used by pretty much every jazz musician following that point. So the half-whole scale is also known as the dominant bop or the half-whole diminished, which is a half step followed by a whole step, semitone followed by a tone. Okay, so making sure that you can play these scales around 12 keys is important because we're going to be using those throughout tunes in different keys, and obviously all 12 keys at some point. When you're thinking of a scale like this, or when you're practicing a scale such as this, which is a symmetrical scale, there's actually only 3 keys you need to worry about before you start repeating yourself. So for instance, G half-whole is exactly the same as B flat, as is C sharp and E. Now they're different starting points, so it's probably a good idea to know them from each starting point, but essentially we start repeating ourselves when we're doing those 4 keys. So we need to make sure we can play them off G, off A flat and A. Okay, so that's the basic starting point with scales. However, you'll very rarely play the scale just like that, up and down, when you're improvising. And so it's important to try and get some melodic freedom, I guess, with these scales. And a good starting point with that, I think, is by playing a few patterns that break up the scale into other intervals other than the tones and semitones that we've been using. Now it's important to recognise when we do these patterns that these aren't patterns to throw into our solos when we see a dominant 7 chord coming up. That really is taking you away from the true spirit of improvisation and just injecting something preconceived into the form which, you know, more likely than not will have nothing to do with what's going on in the rhythm section, the chords that are being suggested by a piano player, or anything that's happening musically in the moment. So really we're just doing these patterns initially to find the pathways within the scale and to get our ear hearing different avenues for melodic development. So let's talk about doing these in thirds. When I say thirds, I just mean skipping one note, coming down to the next. So we essentially go 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, and, you know, coming down 5, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1. So there's one basic pattern that we can use, which is a more along the lines of a melodic idea that we may use when we're improvising. You might want to change that up a little and say invert every second grouping. So instead of going 1, 3, 2, 4, we'll go 1, 3, 4, 2, 3, 5, 6, 4, and so on. Okay, so there's a few there. Then there's also some really classic kind of half-whole ideas that I'm sure you've all heard before. You know, the classic line from Blue Train, Coltrane, played. Okay, so that's one. You may or may not choose to learn that, but it is, you know, a interesting pathway through the half-whole scale. There's also another one that comes up quite often. You know, ideas like that. So you might find just a few patterns to help you technically through the scale, and also then developing your oral skills to hear melodic pathways through those scales. Okay, so the next step is to incorporate this into a 2-5-1. I like to use the 2-5-1 because it really does represent the basic foundations for tension and release in jazz music, especially in the standard repertoire. So we can see the 2 as being a general introduction to tension, the 5 being a strong tension point in the music, and the 1 being the resolution. So in this case, the half-whole being a scale that operates over the dominant chord acting as a fifth, which in the case of a 2-5-1 it is, we'll be playing through the 2-5-1, and each time we hit the dominant chord we'll improvise using the half-whole scale. Okay, so now I've got my metronome, we'll do this. 1, 2, 1. Okay, so hopefully you get the idea there. I would repeat that for, you know, a few minutes on each key and move through 12 keys, making sure that I'm fluent in those key areas. I'm comfortable getting down to the resolution points in each key. Okay, so the third step now is to incorporate this into a tune. Now when I do this, I really like to try and flood my ear with the sound of the scale that I'm trying to incorporate. for me this is really an exercise, and it's about trying to hear the sound of that scale. So you're not going to create the most beautiful solo in the world doing this exercise, because it is really an exercise, but what we'll do is every time we hit a dominant chord that's appropriate, so a dominant chord acting as a fifth, we'll play the half whole scale. So if we were to do a tune like All the Things You Are, each time that dominant chord hits, I'll improvise using the half whole scale. Here we go. 1, 2, Okay, so again I would do that over various tunes and also through various keys, and I do it for a while to allow my ear to really hear those ideas. Obviously you're never going to do this when you're soloing in a performance situation. The ultimate goal there is to really let your mind go and try and play the sounds that you're hearing. I just think this is a good way to develop ideas that you hear. So hopefully after doing this for a while, it becomes a natural part of your oral makeup when you go to improvise. So good luck with it, and I'll see you for the next lesson.